You ever grow up somewhere that just never felt right? Not haunted exactly. Not in the movie kind of way, but in that quiet, heavy way where the air itself seems to remember things you don't. That's how Ashvale was. A small town that looked ordinary enough in daylight, but when the sun went down, it changed. See, we had this old tradition. Every time the power went out, every single house would light candles, not just for light, but for them. No one ever told me who they were, and I never really wanted to know. Until the night I found out. This is what happened the last time the lights went out in Ashvale. I grew up in a small Kentucky town called Ashvale, a place most people would drive through without ever remembering its name. Just a strip of road, an old diner, a few brick stores, and houses leaning into the wind like they'd been tired for decades. It wasn't the kind of town that made the news, and the only thing people really talked about was how often the power went out. Every spring, every storm, sometimes for no reason at all, Ashvale went dark. And whenever it did, the same thing always happened. Every house, every porch, every window, lit up with candles. That was just what people did here. No one explained why. No one questioned it either. I never thought much of it growing up. It was just another small town quirk, like how the diner served breakfast until midnight, or how the church bell still rang even though no one went inside anymore. But my grandma, she believed in it. She believed the candles were important. I was finishing my last shift at the gas station before heading off to college when the lights flickered once, twice, then died for good. The store fell silent except for the hum of the drink cooler winding down. Outside, the sky dimmed and Main Street sank into shadow. I remember standing behind the register, staring at the dead monitors, thinking about how small everything felt, how I'd be leaving soon, and how heavy it was to still be there. By the time I locked up and stepped outside, the street had already begun to glow. Candlelight bloomed behind curtains, on porches, along fences, tiny trembling flames against the dark. It was beautiful in a way, if you didn't think too hard about why we did it. When I was little, I'd asked Grandma once why everyone lit candles during blackouts. She told me, because we have to, because they need light to see. When I asked who they were, she didn't answer. She just looked out the window, watching the dark. At home, Grandma always moved like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The moment the lights went out, she'd hum under her breath, low, tuneless, and light each candle one by one. Her hands would tremble as she whispered little prayers I never understood. I used to watch her wondering if she truly believed what she was saying, or if believing was just easier than asking questions. When I was younger, I thought the candlelight made our street look warm and alive. Now I wasn't so sure. The flames cast long shadows across the windows, stretching and moving in strange ways. Everyone stayed inside during blackouts, always. No one sat on porches, no one walked dogs, no one peeked out the windows for too long. It was as if the whole town held its breath, waiting for the lights to return. And tonight felt worse somehow. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the dark itself was pressing against the glass. By the time I got home, the sky was almost black. The streetlights were dead, and the only illumination came from the faint shimmer of candles in windows up and down the block. Our house sat at the end of Sycamore Lane, a one-story, with peeling blue trim and ivy choking the porch rails. Grandma said she liked being on the edge of town, fewer eyes watching. I never knew what she meant by that. When I opened the door, the smell of melted wax hit me. Candles burned everywhere, on the windowsill, on the counter, on the floor. Their little flames danced against the walls, but the house was quiet. Too quiet. No humming, no prayers. I called out Grandma nothing. She was sitting in her rocking chair by the window, head tilted, eyes open. The candlelight flickered across her face, deepening the wrinkles, making her look carved out of wax herself. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. I knelt beside her, holding her wrist. It was cold damp, her pulse fluttering like a dying flame. I didn't know what to do. There was no signal, no phone service, and even if there was no one in Ashvale ever called for help during a blackout, that was another unspoken rule. So I did what she would have done. I lit more candles. All I could think was keep them burning, keep her safe, keep them away. Hours passed. The candles burned low, their wax pooling on the shelves. The house was filled with their light cold and trembling, but it didn't feel warm. It felt watched. I was lighting the last candle on the windowsill when I saw her. Outside, standing at the edge of the yard, where the candlelight faded into the dark, there was someone there. A woman in a cotton nightdress. Her hair was pinned back neatly. Her shoulders were straight, her head tilted slightly, and even from that distance, I could see her smile. My heart froze. It was Grandma. She raised her hand and beckoned slowly, curling her fingers, inviting me into the dark. Behind me, the chair creaked. When I turned, it was empty. The front door stood open. The candles near it had gone out, their wicks black and smoking. I stumbled back, whispering her name, but there was only the wind and the faint hiss of dying flames. That's when I saw them. At the end of the street, tall, thin figures standing just beyond the reach of candlelight. Dozens of them, unmoving, featureless, but unmistakably there, watching. A neighbor across the street peeked from behind her curtain, saw me, and shook her head frantically before letting it fall back in place. I understood. You never go outside during a blackout, not without a candle, but she was out there, my grandma, or something wearing her shape, and I couldn't leave her alone. So I took one of the candles from the table, a small brass holder she'd used all her life, and stepped outside. The air hit me like ice. Every sound felt swallowed by the dark. The candle flame bent in the wind, trembling but alive. I held it close and started walking toward the tree line at the edge of town. Halfway there, I noticed lights. Hundreds of them deep between the trees. At first, I thought they were other people holding candles. But as I got closer, I realized the truth. The lights weren't being held. They were inside something. Pale shapes, almost human, but blurred at the edges, each one glowing faintly from within, as if a candle burned inside their chests. They stood still, facing one direction toward me, and among them, my grandmother. Her eyes were open, but empty, her hands limp at her sides. She stood among the pale figures, like one of them, her nightgown swaying slightly, though the air was still. That's when her voice echoed in my head, something she'd said when I was little. They need light to find their way home. If we don't give it to them, they'll find another glow to follow. And I understood. The candles weren't to keep them out. They were to guide them through. If the light ever went out, they would look for another source, another warmth, another living glow. Something shifted behind her. A taller shadow stepped forward, darker than all the rest. Its shape bent the light around it. It raised a hand, long skeletal fingers curling upward. The gesture was clear. It wanted the candle. My light for her. I felt my knees shake. If I gave it up, I'd have nothing between me and the dark. But she was my grandmother. I couldn't just leave her there. So I stepped forward and held out the brass candle. The shadow's hand closed around its skin, cracking like old ice. The moment my fingers let go, the light vanished. Darkness crashed over me. Something cold brushed my cheek, like smoke with claws. I lunged forward, grabbed her wrist. For a moment, she was lifeless. Then she gasped, her eyes cleared, focusing on me. And then everything screamed. Not with sound, but with pressure, vibration, movement. The dark around us convulsed like a living thing. They were coming. I pulled her forward. We ran stumbling, gasping branches, tearing at our clothes. The pale watchers pressed closer, their eyeless faces turning as we passed. The woods felt endless. My lungs burned, my legs gave out, and still the dark followed. We broke through the trees. The house was ahead, porch lights, dead candles flickering weakly in the windows. She fell against me, whispering, "Leave me. They only need one." "No," I shouted. The shadows spilled across the grass, reaching for her ankles. I tried to pull her, but the ground felt alive beneath us, moving like breath. Then, across the street, a door opened. Mr. Parrish, our neighbor, stood there, holding 2 thick pillar candles. The flames were steady despite the wind. He looked terrified, but he held them out. "Take it," he yelled. I grabbed them, shoved one into Grandma's hand. The moment she held it, the shadows recoiled, folding backward, vanishing into the air like smoke pulled by a vacuum. And then, silence. We made it inside. I set her down, lit more candles until every surface glowed again. The sky outside began to pale. Streetlights flickered back on. Power returned with a faint electric hum, as if the night had never happened. I cleaned the cuts along her arms, the bruises on her wrists. She was shaking but alive. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you for bringing me home." I smiled weakly. "You're safe now." She nodded, eyes drifting closed. Her breathing steadied, and I just sat there, listening to the sound of the refrigerator starting up again, the TV clicking on by itself, the normal hum of life returning. But the air still felt wrong. The candles still burned, even though daylight filled the room. I thought about blowing them out, but I couldn't. Because when the first ray of sunlight touched Grandma's hand, her skin seemed to blur for just a second, like smoke caught in the light. I blinked, and it was gone. She was solid again, breathing. Maybe I was just tired. I told myself that as I lit one last candle and set it by the window. Its flame flickered, once then burned steady. Out past the yard beyond the fields, I could see the tree line. Even in daylight, something moved their tiny, faint pinpricks of gold between the trunks. Too many to be fireflies. They stood still waiting. And I realized something I didn't want to admit. Maybe I'd broken something. Maybe by bringing her back, I'd kept one of them from finding its way home. Now they were waiting for the next time the lights went out. And in Ashvale, they always do. I still live with the lamps on now. I keep matches in every drawer, candles in every room. Not because I'm afraid of the dark exactly, but because I know it's not empty. Grandma passed away last winter. Peacefully, they said. I was the only one who noticed that the lights flickered the moment she stopped breathing. And outside the window, the woods glowed again. Maybe the candles really do help them find their way home. Or maybe they just help them find us. So if you ever drive through a little town in Kentucky and see candles burning in every window, don't stop. Don't ask questions. And whatever you do, don't be the only house left dark.